There's a lot in that question. And I know that the people who will come after us and speak will have some more specific thoughts on that to answer your question. I mean, I will make one very obvious observation, which is there is a role clearly for HCD and Cal HFA to play in terms of targeting our investments in ways. I think we talked about having a proven track record of really helping put new housing in the marketplace, helping stabilize the marketplace, making sure we have competitive lending and financing tools, serving certain populations that are frankly not being served in the marketplace as a whole. But I think part of what you're getting at are sort of more structural issues. I mean, I think there's been a lot of good research. The LAO report, you'll hear from them as well, talks about there are some basic supply challenges. There is simply a lack of housing kind of at all levels here in California. And it's certainly not clear that that's going to be solved by having some gigantic state housing program to kind of buy your way out of it. I think there probably is more of a composite solution that addresses some of those gaps in the market while still having a robust role for HCD and Cal HFA. There is no silver bullet, I think it's safe to say, in this effort.
You have a continuum of housing needs, which are probably going to have to take a continuum, a variety of different things. So it's not just resources. There are probably some policy changes or regulatory changes you may want to look at that deals with actually making it easier to build affordable housing. So one of the things that I continue to say is that you can build affordable housing or you can make housing affordable. And so the way you go about that might be a variety of different ways. Are you providing subordinate financing to buy down that housing and make that housing affordable? Are you removing some of the barriers to building that housing, so therefore you're now building affordable housing? There are many areas in our state in which the rent burden and the cost to rent is actually more than home ownership. And we're finding that. We have some data on that now. So are we promoting home ownership in those areas that we truly should be promoting home ownership because it's cheaper to buy than it is to rent? And then one of the gaps that we have on the workforce housing or the multifamily side is that in those areas in which you need that rental housing at that 50, 60, 70, 80% AMI, there are no federal programs that actually help to close that gap. So in some of your higher cost areas where affordable or workforce rental housing are needed, we don't have a state program necessarily for that or a federal program because federal tax credits are limited to 50 to 60% AMI. So looking at ways in which to close that gap, and that's one of the things that I had committed to, that I would continue to work on at Cal HFA and looking at perhaps pilot or demonstration programs, utilizing my own resources so that I'm not competing with the precious resources that may be offered to HCD so that they can get at their more vulnerable populations. And so those are one of the things that I am at Cal HFA I'm committed to doing, is looking at ways and through partnerships, whether it's the state treasurer or the U.S. Treasury through new federal financing programs, to look at more workforce housing or that gap where we see home ownership is not attainable, and then maybe looking at more ways as well is to help the market create more affordable units or create mixed income developments and then incentivizing those opportunities.
Just a quick follow-up. Thank you both for the comments. So on the rental piece, the rental burden, if I could just ask for your opinion on this, and I'm probably not doing myself a favor since I have a bill in this regard, and it's controversial, but with regard to inclusionary ordinances requiring below market rate in rental housing, it's been subject of the Palmer decision and some others, and on the full purchase side, there's a Supreme Court action on that. Do either of you feel that on the rental piece that inclusionary ordinances can be effective in terms of at least shoehorning a certain amount of below market rate rental, particularly in high cost areas? I'm just curious what your opinion is. I know you can't speak for the governor and whether or not he would ever sign or veto something like that, but we're looking for any way to relieve burdens on renters. Of course, this would be prospective, not retroactive. Just curious about your opinions on the efficacy of those kinds of approaches on the local level.
You know, maybe I can just speak from my perspective nationally from working at HUD on these issues. I will say that HUD did a little bit of work trying to promote and promulgate some of the best practices around inclusionary zoning ordinances and regulations nationally. Did a fair amount of work kind of cataloging some best practices. I think there are certainly places in this country where, you know, more affordable units we're actually getting created through Montgomery County as a class example, good inclusionary ordinances than were getting created by subsidy. So it can be effective for adding to the stock. There is nuance. We did see in the downturn, the financial downturn, a number of jurisdictions actually have to kind of backpedal off of their inclusionary ordinances because essentially the fee or impact that they were requiring appeared to be prohibitive to getting any new development or construction at all. So I think generally, at least from putting my HUD hat on, it's a valuable program which can be very effective, but it definitely depends on the local context.
There's no restriction on the number of questions. So, first of all, just as I'm trying to delve into these numbers, one thing, if you can help clarify for me, when I'm looking at the numbers here on the third page or fourth page of the agenda, and you have the remaining balances, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Are those balances that cannot be expended because they need to remain in place to offset any potential issues that come up from existing loans or costs?
Thank you for that question. The remaining balance is a composite of a number of factors. One is reserves for default in the case of the default. We also are setting aside authority. This is mainly bond authority, so it's not cash sitting in the bank, but we're setting aside authority within the Prop 1C and Prop 46 funds for long-term monitoring. As you know, most of our developments require 55 years of affordability, and some of our grant programs are at 20 years. So we have to make sure that we are taking care of those the monitoring of those properties to ensure their long-term affordability. So that's taken into account in these figures as well. But there is on occasion disencumbrances and the opportunity to look at reprogramming or putting funds out. And so although it's not much, what we were thinking and looking at this yesterday is that we'd like to follow up with you and provide you a more detailed chart of what the remaining balances reflect, everything from the 4% default reserve that we typically have for our programs, what's involved in the administration of the program long term, what are the state operation costs, and then what's maybe available for additional local assistance. So I think breaking that out might help you a little bit. But the majority of the funds that show here in the remaining balance are to help administer the program long term. And I think there was a revised packet that was provided to you that indicates that in the footnotes as well. So
is that this one, right?
Yes. Well, it is also in the so if I may, this is the annual report that we provide to the legislature that gives you a more comprehensive look at how we've expended our programs annually and cumulatively. I will note that I just found out coming to this session a few minutes ago that the more comprehensive attachments in our annual report, the version that you have, was printed on portrait rather than landscape, so there's some additional fields that we need to provide to you right after this hearing. But this does provide a very comprehensive look at how we've been expending our money by program, also by geography. It has information about leverage and number of units that we've been able to assist across the variety of programs.
So when you say leverage, as in federal and local funds?
Yes, we roll it up.
State.
Yes.
Okay. Because one of the things that I'm very interested in finding out is what is the typical cost of the state's investment? What are we getting for our dollars? You just very simple math. You look at, for example, the Cal Home General Fund, what's been committed broken down based on the number of units. You get one figure. If you do it on the MHP program, you get another figure, and the least one, I mean, the grand total of all the programs combined yield the lowest amount. So that's the state's investment on average. And so I'm assuming, so this has all of the federal per unit as well?
This represents in the attachments mainly your bond programs, the Prop 1C and Prop 46, and it says what our investment is and then what other investments were brought to the table, whether they're local funds, private funds, or federal funds. So it aggregates the other funds in comparison to our state investment. We don't necessarily break it down in terms of what all those other funds represent, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'm going to be interested to ask to get per unit cost. I just want to know what goes exactly into, not to micromanage, but
Sure.
to just understand the effectiveness of what the costs are.
And each of the programs vary greatly in terms of what they're buying and what they're used for. So the multifamily housing program is to provide rental housing either through building or preserving or rehabbing rental housing. And so we're buying affordability in that rental housing unit. The Cal Home program is a combination of different activities, just to give you a flavor. So it's down payment assistance potentially, it's mobile home renovation. And so we would also want to help you understand what we're buying and what the use is in conjunction with the leverage and the per cost, if that makes sense. So a down payment assistance program is going to be a lot less per homeowner investment than, say, investing in a hard unit in the multi-housing program. So if that makes sense.
Okay, so then comparing Propositions 46 and 1C programs, which ones have been the most successful in increasing allowing us to have a higher yield in housing units?
Can you clarify when you say higher yield, you mean?
Yep. Well, I'm assuming the 46 came first, so we would have learned some additional more ways of being efficient, but then by the time 1C came in, there may have been higher land costs associated. So I just wanted to kind of get a sense of, given the two propositions, the bonds that we had available, what yielded more, which one allowed us to have more number of units?
Well, I would say our flagship program, as Ben mentioned earlier, is the Multifamily Housing Assistance Program, which is usually coupled with either the 4% tax credits or the 9% tax credits. And so that has yielded the most affordable rental housing units in both the Prop 46 and Prop 1C.
Okay. But the MHP, the initial MHP program, walk me through this a little bit. The initial MHP program, or Prop 46 MHP program, was it just one program? Because then when you look at 1C, there's 3 different programs, or broken down into 3 different programs.
Which, where are you?
Between general, supportive, or homeless youth. This is pages 3 and 4.
Yes.
Or was it the same in 46 as well, but not broken down that way?
You are correct that there were some subsets in providing for homeless youth a certain amount. And so, yes, there were some small subsets, but primarily the bulk of the money has gone to the supportive housing program and the general multifamily housing program.
Okay. So in instances where it's not being spent on construction, but it's or lowering the cost in order to make it affordable, if it's going towards programs, homelessness related or other, why is there still a balance remaining? Would those funds aren't contingent on anything, or are they?
Can I just clarify one point which might be helpful here? The MHP supportive housing funds are construction money. They're going to actually put new permanent supportive housing units online. It's just that those funds are reserved only for projects that come in that have the characteristics of providing supportive housing, that have relationships in place with supportive housing providers, with supportive service providers that are providing a preference for formerly homeless individuals. And there is some flexibility given in terms of how those funds can be used, but they're still being used overwhelmingly to support the construction of hard costs for new units.
Okay. But going back to I've seen it in other places where there would be, for example, a certain a program associated, supportive program associated with housing needs. Those programs, program funds, at some point they would have to be all exhausted. So when I see a balance, why are there balances left?
The balance reflects what is needed to continue to monitor the affordable housing over the 55 years and to pay for state administration costs associated with issuing bonds. So we pay the treasurer, we pay the controller to help with the issuance of the bonds to pay for these programs. And so there are costs associated with that. And we establish a reserve in the case that somebody defaults, if a developer at some point defaults on a particular project, then we have reserves to be able to maybe step in and save that project if needed. So there is those costs that continue even though we've already constructed the particular housing. We still need to monitor them. We have a very robust asset management division that is regularly going out on an annual basis to inspect the property and ensure that the appropriate levels of affordability are being maintained, that the property is being kept up. So all of that continues on even after a project has been developed. And so that's the remaining, for the most part, the remaining balances that you are seeing in the Prop 1C and Prop 46.
Maybe I didn't ask the question right. So my apologies.
Sure.
Let me try to see if I can find a better example. Through these bonds, there was money allocated not just towards the actual housing, whether construction, whether lessening the cost of a shelter unit, but there's also dollars going towards needs for the individuals inhabiting that unit. Programmatic costs, right?
I think that's the mistake. When it was bond funds, it went on capital programs.
It's just entirely on
Yeah,
capital.
they can't spend bond funds on non-capital projects. So even though they may have a program, it's a program to build units. So I think that's the disconnect that we're having, is that bond funds go to fund hard capital costs. Bond funds are not generally used for a program to help, like provide rental assistance or to provide needs for the person. It's to build the unit or for a program to support the building of the unit. Am I correct, Lisa?
Yes. There has been some general fund allocations made for providing operational assistance for shelters, but that comes out of general fund, not out of the bond funds.
So then whatever it is that we're investing in addition to that, there would be county level funds made available to make sure that assistance is provided to the family or individuals in question.
So for instance, on our supportive housing multifamily housing program, we do require that supportive services are attached and wrapped to the housing. And so there is the requirement that the development proposal include other resources and mechanisms by which they're bringing those services to the residents, and that there is a service plan that is put in place. But those services are largely funded through the other resources, not through the bond funds
Right.
that we.
Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate the clarification. So that leads me to another question, which is, do we have a number of what those costs are borne upon the county? What I'm trying to understand is the total cost associated. It doesn't really matter which level of government it comes from. At the end of the day, there's a total cost associated with taxpayers paying into this, whether it's broken down into local, county, state, federal, bond. That's what I'm trying to get a sense for. So would you be able to provide that number?
There are some very good studies that we can provide you that outline what the typical costs are to provide permanent supportive housing, as well as what are the cost savings to the systems when we're able to house very vulnerable people, and particularly chronic homelessness. So I think those two things might be something we could provide you as a follow-up, because I think it's important to see not only the costs, but also then what are the savings that are attributed to not being in emergency rooms, not being in the jail system. So there is, both what it costs to operate a particular permanent supportive housing unit, but then I think there is also important to know what are the savings at a global scale that can happen to the system. So we'd be happy to follow up with some of those reports and research that has been done.
Okay, so long as that takes into account that it's pairing up the portion of the county investments that will be coupled with these specific projects, for example. So programs that would be enhancing the housing programs that the state and federal governments have spent monies on. Just to differentiate from ongoing assistance to folks in need versus folks in need who benefit from those programs in these housing projects.
Most of the permanent supportive housing, the services are really about connecting to mainstream resources. So it's connecting to resources that exist in the community, whether they be through the county, through the health system, through the providers. And so I'm not sure if we'll have the level of detail that you are looking at, but we can give you kind of this is how it typically works. But we do not necessarily track that level of detail in terms of where exactly is all the funding coming from to provide the services to a particular development. But we can give you a generality.
And I think actually what we can do is provide you with a study or two that actually do that full cost-benefit analysis, maybe not in the context of our portfolio, but in other cases where the same model is being employed. And generally the findings have been very positive from a kind of cost-benefit perspective, because by providing that stable, long-term permanent supportive housing, you're typically reducing the formerly homeless individuals' utilization of other parts of the healthcare system. You're keeping them out of shelters, you're keeping them out of emergency rooms, you're keeping them out of other intensive service, high-cost service delivery mechanisms, and stabilizing their situation.
Okay, thank you. And also, just to let you know in advance, I'd love to see if you can also help figure out present-day value as well for those costs. So I'm assuming if those are studies from 2-3 years ago, what would the increases be in the services provided, as well as cost and land change over time? And so currently, how many projects do we have in the pipeline that would benefit from these funds that we're not able to currently move forward with?
I would not be able to probably guesstimate that. I will say that every competition that we put out, we are oversubscribed. So, for instance, we put out the NOFA for the Veterans Housing and Homelessness Assistance Program, and 75 million went out. We got $180 million in requests. We expect that the AHSC program will be oversubscribed. Our MHP NOFAs were oversubscribed. So we're seeing that there is still a heavy demand. The 9% program in particular for TCAC is also heavily oversubscribed. But to tell you how large that pipeline is, I'm not sure if we could estimate that. But we are seeing plenty of demand for any monies that we are putting out.
Okay. You know what? Since I have you in front of me now, I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but I just want to, if you can briefly tell me a little bit about your mobile home program. Recently, an issue has, as recent as yesterday, come to my attention. I believe there's a bill on it as well. I don't want to get into the merits of the bill because I haven't had a chance to review it, but can you tell me a little bit more about what the process is in permitting mobile home construction?
And are we referring to mobile home parks or actual?
Mobile home parks, yes.
And in the development of a mobile home park?
Yes.
A new mobile home park?
Yes.
All right.
Di Richardson is joining. Yes, our ledge director.
Hi, I'm Di Richardson. I'm the legislative director for both HCD and Cal HFA. I'm fairly certain I know what issue you're referring to. When HCD does have responsibility for monitoring parks for health and safety violations, when somebody goes to make a change, renovation, or add certain things on to their mobile home, they are required to get a permit from HCD. Not everyone does that. And if we find out that they do it without a permit, we send someone out to inspect the home. And if it's done incorrectly, they have to take off whatever that addition was that they basically added illegally. There is some concern from one of the counties that these homes have been significantly renovated, and they no longer meet the definition of a mobile home, which is fairly specific. You can add a lot of things on around a mobile home, but that doesn't make it no longer a mobile home or a manufactured home, because those things can be taken off. It's really hard to tell just from looking from the outside whether something really still meets that definition. There's a whole thing going with the chassis underneath and things that are way beyond my level of understanding. But we have asked the county that has been complaining about that issue to provide us with some addresses, and we can check to see if we actually did issue permits, and then we could look at those. They haven't provided those addresses. I will tell you that the problem is if we go out there and we determine that those mobile homes are actually don't meet the definition of a mobile home anymore, they have to take them out of the park. They can no longer be in the park. And as you know, mobile homes are a very critical piece of our affordable housing stock. So it's sort of, we're in a position where we want them to follow the rules and the regulations, but we don't want to just suddenly be in the position of ripping all these homes out of the park and creating, contributing to the homeless population.
I can assure you, just given the photos I've seen, these are not homeless individuals. So, again, I don't want to misspeak because I don't know all the details on this, but the photos I saw were alarming. So I really do hope that I can get a more definitive response from you very soon.
We've asked for specific addresses, and again, those have not been provided to us. So if you have those, perhaps that would be, we can work together to get that done.
Okay. So from what I understand, there's maybe about 300 pieces of properties on parcels that have been developed on already, which also tells me it's a loss of revenue for the state, given how much revenue can be generated from property tax from these parcels that are only paying $17, I think, annually to have the beautiful homes built on.
Right.
While maintaining the chassis
Right.
beneath
Right. And I
as
can
a
get somebody that
foundation.
can explain that a little bit better.
Okay.
It's I'm not a mechanical person at all.
I-
But I know that we've been talking to them, we've asked them for some of that information, and it's just, what they've asked us for is a list of all the mobile homes in the county. Well, it would be easier to probably do it the other way. If they have concerns about something specific, we'd like to send an inspector out and go look at those. But we're working on it from both ends.
Okay. Okay. To be continued. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have about 40 minutes or so for the next part of our program. I'd like to invite Brian Euler from the LAO and Matt Schwartz from the California Housing Partnership Corporation to join us.